Did this end up with you going to jail?
No.
Okay.
Thank God.
Comedian and influencer Kristina Hart. Welcome to the show.
I never knew who I was. I thought my life was ending. I had never kissed a boy. I had never, a guy, 30 years old. And I'm like, can I spend the night at someone's house? I'm going to kill this Everything was based out of fear.
I think it's very dangerous territory.
The intersection of religion and modern culture. This is a very strongly held belief.
Yes.
Which is crazy. I don't know how to, that's pretty wild.
I'm going to lose some friends over this episode. It's okay. I still love y'all anyway.
I know, me too.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Rooted Recovery Stories. I'm Patrick Custer, your host. So glad that each and every one of you are here, and extra glad that my guest today, comedian and influencer Kristina Hart.
Hello.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so glad you're here.
I'm so happy to be here.
This has been a long time coming, and there's no telling what's going to come out of our mouths today.
It's true. Put us together. And,
I feel like it's going to be divinely influenced. That's what I'm going to say.
I hope so.
Hopefully God will sign off on it. Or the powers that be. All right.
Power.
Yeah. You're nervous?
A little bit.
Good.
Let's go, though.
Little nerves always.
I love it.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, so my first question is super easy. How did you get so funny?
Trauma. What? I think, comedy comes from tragedy.
Yeah.
So I had some things happen in life and I used humor to cope, and I never expected to be a comedian. I never planned. I know that's so cliche, but that was not the path that I thought I had. I never expected to be posting content on the internet and people being like, you're funny. So
You mean like OnlyFans? Or?
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
I would be way more rich.
For the record, Kristina does not have an OnlyFans. That was a joke.
Not right now.
It's a bad economy. I mean, who knows what's going to happen in 2024?
I know, it's so true. If Instagram goes away, you may find me in other places.
Hold on. Is there a threat of this happening?
Well, I don't know. Always.
Oh, gosh.
I feel like that's like my fear,
In the universe. Oh, gosh. Okay. So let's take it back. Before the trauma happened, kind of paint a picture of your life as a youngster for us.
Okay. So, I was born in Los Angeles, which I feel like is the equivalent of being born in Nashville at this point.
Yeah.
We're like unicorns. And my family is Persian, so they are from Iran. So I was raised by Iranian immigrants. And that basically means that I'm supposed to have been a doctor, a lawyer, or a dentist. We're very high achievers, and my family placed a lot of importance on pursuing education and career. So, my mom, she was Muslim and converted to Protestant Christianity through the televangelist Benny Hinn.
Not Benny Hinn.
Yeah. So I used to go to mother-daughter outings to crusades for Benny Hinn, and I would fake fall down. I would watch my mom. And
so you know that I know what you're talking about, because I grew up in the same circle as well. But for those people who don't know, so how do you describe Benny Hinn? Televangelist, very Pentecostal,
yes. Very Pentecostal, 90s. People would give their money to the TV, and he would say, "You're going to be healed."
If you're alive and you were alive. If you're alive now and you were alive in the 90s or early 2000s and you stayed up past 8 p.m. and watched one of the TV stations, non-network TV stations, there was syndicated Benny Hinn guaranteed that you saw.
Yeah.
Silver-haired Middle Eastern guy. Is that appropriate for me to describe him?
Yeah.
So
wearing all designer clothes.
Yes. Very flashy.
Flies private.
And they'd have all the telecasts would really just be this people lining up and for healing or for prayer or whatever.
And my mother went to Israel to get baptized in the Jordan River by Benny Hinn. So she was, you could say, a mild cult-like follower. But so, and then on the other side, my dad is a scientist.
Okay.
So was an atheist basically, like growing up. So how could I not become a comedian with those two figures, you know, in my household? Was
the spiritual conflict between the two, like, did it make the air thick?
Oh, they had an extremely, like, sorry, Dad, volatile marriage.
Yeah.
It was very traumatic. They couldn't divorce because financially they couldn't afford it.
Okay.
So we all lived in the same house, but it was just chaos.
Oh.
And then we moved to California, and I went to UC Santa Barbara, and that's kind of where my recovery journey, I would say, or the substance use journey started.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and then recovery, also like religious trauma recovery, mental health. But that story continues on with a little bit more tragedy, and then humor as a way of coping. And that's kind of how I ended up here today.
Yeah. So going back, you said when the struggle at home as a youngster, you were already using humor to cope with trauma. No?
I mean, yeah, I think definitely. I think that I felt awkward in social settings because I didn't really have coping mechanisms for my feelings. I didn't know how to express myself. I didn't learn that from my parents. I was very scared when there was any kind of perceived conflict. So I would just make jokes.
How did your parents deal with conflict growing up?
Not well. My dad is very much like a Zen Buddhist type now, but he had very strong anger problems. A lot of it is just being immigrants in the US. I think they struggle, they have a hard time, and they don't kind of know how to manage or express their emotions. So my mom, she was like, don't be a victim. You know, Jesus died for us, like, be happy. And so anything that was negative, I thought was bad. And so that kind of is what led me to believe that I needed something in order to feel happy. And that's where, kind of took a turn.
I love that you had an internal voice guiding you, saying like you deserve to be happy in some way, shape, or form. Yeah.
I had a strong faith as a kid. Like, I think I really understood what like love from Jesus was, even though like everything else was very extravagant and unrelatable. So I feel like in really difficult times where I felt very alone, I actually had that as a child and a teenager, even though I had no idea who I was or what I was doing, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can relate to what you're saying.
Yeah.
For sure. So when you went to UC Santa Barbara, is that what you said? Okay. So going to college, this phase of your life, I mean, I think it's pretty typical that we all fall into some stuff.
Yeah.
Exploring the world, testing our limits and boundaries. But with what you're willing to, you know, what you mentioned, trauma happened there. And like, what was it?
Yeah.
That you can talk about?
Yeah. Well, I had never drank alcohol. I had never done anything. I was a good Christian kid. I did very well in school and high school, but my parents, we moved around a lot, and I lived with different parents. And I even lived with a friend the last 2 years of high school because my parents, their marriage was so bad. Which I now realize how abnormal that was.
Yeah.
But so when
did it just feel like a party to you? Like you were just fun?
Yeah.
I would have loved to go stay with friends for.
Yeah. I mean, and I got to, it really actually was enjoyable. I knew there was something very wrong with it, but just based on my parents' reactions. But and then so when I went to college, I got to experience and be free for the first time, but I still didn't know how to express myself. So I had all of these emotions, and then I added alcohol to that. And then I added all of the things that you don't experience when you're in a bubble. So I had never kissed a boy. I had never, like a boy, I'm guy. I had never done it. I was just like, I'm a good Christian.
Right.
But UC Santa Barbara is like the top one in the top 10 party schools.
No.
It's a great school, but it's a party school. And I lived
You were thrown
in
right
Isla
in.
Vista. Yeah. So that first week, like I drank and I blacked out the first week of college. And I was like, oh, I feel like nothing. You know, I don't remember what I feel. So that feels better than me feeling sad or me feeling lonely or me feeling separated from or different than other people. So I kind of went through college like that, but I met such wonderful friends that I'm still friends with now. And they see me through so many eras of my life. But I drank a lot. And then in order to do well in school, I ended up buying Adderall from like a friend of mine who was selling it. And I stayed up and I did well and I felt happier. So I was like, oh, this is the solution, which, you know, in the big book, I'm not the person that knows the page numbers in the big book of AA but I know that it says that at some point you think that you find out that the solution is actually the problem. And I thought, or what is it the other way around? I messed that up. That
the problem, the substance is not the problem. That like alcohol was but a symptom.
Yes.
Right. It's the underlying causes and conditions.
A lot better said. Yes.
Took me a second.
I know. So, and I learned all that later, but I would take Adderall thinking that Adderall was the solution to me being able to do well in school, to feel better, to be more social, because I had a lot of social anxiety. But I noticed that I would take more than my friends would, or I would want more and like they were done. And so that led me down a path of trying things, but I never did it regularly until I went to a psychiatrist who said I was very ADHD, which I am, but Adderall was not what I needed, and that was prescribed to me. So,
Same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So at some point you start taking more.
Time bomb.
Yeah, you take more and more, and you don't feel happy. You don't feel the way you did the first time. It's very classic. Like that was the only thing that I really felt like I was abusing.
Did you ever forget to sleep?
Yes. Oh God. It's just like sad now, but yeah, I mean,
That was a rhetorical question because I knew that was the case, and
I would read books. Like I thought I was smart because I was like, I'm taking this, but I'm reading educational books.
Oh yeah.
You know, so I'm like, oh, I'm very smart. And
would you retain any of that information?
No.
Though? Right.
No.
It was like one side of the brain out the other.
Yes.
And
like when I would write, I thought I was writing amazing papers or essays, but I'm a writer and I can tell you that shit was awful that I was writing. It didn't make any sense. It was like,
but in the moment, the chemicals that are like flooding your brain because of Adderall make you feel like anything you're doing is so great and important. And it is, I mean, like, I kind of love talking about this because it still mesmerizes me to this day.
I know, me too.
How you can take something and like alcohol makes sense to me, how like we just see like it dulls your, you know, and everything. It depresses you and what have you. But like the uppers just, God, they like totally.
Yeah.
You're convinced everything is just so much. I'm more important. You're more important. What we're doing is more important. And we could be slicing cheese for all.
Yeah. I mean, I would go on tangents.
No.
The tangents.
Tangents.
The tangents I would go on. And I would be like obsessed with a particular topic. And I'm already fairly OCD, like, you know, without anything.
Yeah.
So then give me some stimulants.
Oh, of course.
And I would tell you like I don't know. I would tell you who the bodyguard was for Benny Hinn and his entire life and why that was just like the craziest addition and just say weird things. But I thought that they were really important at the time.
Wait, now I am really interested. Who is the bodyguard of Benny Hinn that you knew about?
Okay, actually, one of the bodyguards is He works at Cafe Coco, one of the owners. Yes, when I did a show there, he was like, because I have a Benny Hinn joke, and he was like, do you know that I was the bodyguard? He used to like, have to catch people and
Is Benny Hinn still alive?
He's still alive. I think he's still doing it too.
Is he?
Yeah.
Interesting.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, good for him.
Money still goes,
It does. I mean.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So that started that journey. And then after I graduated, my parents were still in their kind of volatile phase with each other. Yeah. And then I'm now pursuing a career. So I obviously need more Adderall to do well in my career. So I continued kind of getting prescriptions and then stopping them and getting prescriptions.
When you say stopping them, did you get discontinued because you took too much and your doctor cut you off, or did you literally stop them yourself?
No, I stopped myself. So like I was always able to do that, but I missed it. I wanted it. I craved it. And I always would go back. And my friends didn't know unless we all were taking it for like a party or something, which is what we did in that time too.
Right.
So, but that's kind of what I stuck with. But I was completely losing, like I never knew who I was.
Yeah. And
I continued to not know who I was. And I continued to just live this life of like trying to numb what I'm feeling because I felt too much. And if I could just numb it, then I would be able to go on with the next day. Right. And that all worked until my mom was diagnosed with cancer. And I was her primary caretaker. So, so I had...
What stage was it when she was diagnosed?
It was stage 4 brain cancer. So it was a glioblastoma. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And she believed that she'd be healed. So she did not do chemo or radiation. And so that was the worst experience. Like 5 months was very short.
Can we take that apart?
Yes.
I want to know.
Please.
Having grown up in that, right? Like we've established, my parents were the same, and still are to this day, very devout and the same faith. I mean, listen, I believe in miracles. I think I shared with you my health story from a few years back. I don't know why miracles happen sometimes and miracles don't the other times, and there's just, a lot of, personally, I've come to peace with the fact that when it comes to faith, like I have certain things that I believe, but there's a lot of things I don't, and that's okay. Or that I don't understand.
Yeah.
I don't have to understand. I don't have to be able to put it in a black and white box. I think that's what crippled me when I was younger. So a lot of the questions that were along those lines that would cripple me is the whole, like, that statement, God is everything or is he nothing? If he's everything, then, and I know that's a big recovery phrase, but like in the evangelical circles, like you said, it's, you will be healed. You believe beyond the shadow of a doubt. That's the case. When you're entering into something like that in a family that believes this way, and you are an adult and your mom says this and she's been given that news, what goes through your mind? Yeah.
It's honestly, it was maddening because she would repeat over and over, because the brain tumor was impacting her speech and her thought process. She would repeat over and over.
On diagnosis, it was already that advanced.
Well, it progressed pretty quickly. And there were some really wild miracles that did happen in that time. And I feel like those were little gifts. But the reality was she would say things like signs, wonders, miracles, signs. And she'd ask me, she'd say, what was it again? Because she wouldn't remember. And I'd have to sit there and say, signs, wonders, miracles. And that is what kept her going. And I respect that, because I don't know what it's like to live with that.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's like to feel what she was feeling. But we would, but I was so heartbroken. And because I knew, I don't think everyone else knew, but I knew early on she was going to die. And that's why I was like, I'll be by her side. And that's why I don't have any regrets, because I put everything into being with her. Even though it was, she was also, I mean, imagine just like, I love my mom, but she was like a 5'2" Protestant feisty woman. And she'd be like, what was it? Signs, wonders. And I'm like, oh my God,
Yes.
But the people in her church, they supported that decision. Mm-hmm. And that was really difficult because we're like, can you please tell her that chemo and radiation are good things that can help her in this situation. Mm-hmm. And I've come to peace, like, with all of her choices. Like I said, I don't know what that was like. And that brain tumor, was impacting her. But it made me really not know who God is, what God is.
Because I have a question.
Yeah.
At this point where you were in your faith journey, I want to know where, that's what I want to know is where you were. Because I know for me, if I had been faced with that how old were you at the time?
I was 25, I think. Yeah.
Okay. So
or
25.
26,
yeah.
Somewhere in that.
I mean, I was raised to believe the same way my parent, right? Like, so I would have felt like for me to be good, to follow along the path that I had been raised with, I had to believe the same thing.
Yeah.
I had to toe the same line, speak the same truth, speak the same faith, and support the same, right? And so in my brain, I would have felt treasonous, right, to God, to the God I was told was the only way God is.
Yeah.
How did you, at that point already, like, that's what I mean when I say, what was going through your brain to be able to come to...
Yeah. I still believed in healing. And I believed that, I'm not sure if I actually believed it or if that felt like the safe choice at the time, but I believed like God heals and he will heal her. And actually to the point where my younger brother at the time was in a missions group called Youth with a Mission, YWAM, which I had done actually for 2 years before that. And so my mom didn't want him to come. He was like 18. She didn't want him to come home because she believed she'd be healed. And I think she didn't want him to see her like that. And I remember talking to like one of his, they're called like base leaders. And I was like, no, she's going to be healed. Like it's fine. He's good there. And he was having like panic attacks. And
this is hard.
Yeah. So I think I definitely convinced myself, that absolutely, which it can, right?
Yes. But there's a difference between believing a miracle is possible and I want to speak faith and words of like health and life over this person because like words have power. I believe that to this day. There's a difference between that and also accepting a realistic probability that this reality is right. Like, so what happened to the point? Because you said, I knew at a certain point she was going to, because at that crossroads, I mean, like that would have been a diabolical for me.
It is.
Like I would have.
No, the dualism, it makes you like, this is not a mental diagnosis, but it makes you bipolar essentially, because you're like, I believe in healing. I know she's going to die. I believe in healing. I know she's going to die because I'm looking at her and every time we go to the doctor, the prognosis is not good and I'm physically taking care of her. So I'm seeing that she's getting worse very quickly. And so reconciling that with God as a God of miracles for a 26-year-old with my history, it was tragic. And, then she died. And
what did that do to your faith?
Yeah, I think I didn't deal with it. So I remember refilling a prescription, and being like, this will help me keep going. And, I got a job at a private jet company and it was like all celebrities and I just ignored this insane pain that I felt. And my whole family was broken. No one knew how to handle it. My dad, he had been separated or had this, volatile relationship with this woman. And then the beautiful thing is they reconciled when she got sick. So I had never in my life seen my parents hold hands. I had never in my life. But he just was so broken and isolated after because he had to process that. And so I was the strong, get everything done person. But, meanwhile, I'm taking things to make that happen. And then I started to have these panic attacks, and I would be like, I was at Whole Foods with my friends in Brentwood, Los Angeles. And I remember sitting there kind of outside on the sidewalk, and everything started to get blurry. And I had no idea. I thought I had a brain tumor, and I thought I was going to have a seizure or something. And I had a panic attack, had to sit on the sidewalk. My friends had to drive me home. And that scenario ended up happening multiple times. And I became very angry and very hysterical. And I just was in a constant fight or flight response. It's like a stage. Yeah. So I had a nervous breakdown. I left my job and I ended up moving to Irvine, California, in with my dad at 28 years old, which is not ideal for a single woman for your dating life.
I love to ask this because all growing up, I would hear nervous breakdown.
Yeah.
In reality, there's not one flavor of it.
No.
So I'm curious.
Right. No, mine wasn't.
What did it look like? So how did it manifest? Obviously,
Sure.
the moving home, the whatever. But what else happened that for you that was the breaking point there?
Yeah. I became obsessive. One day I became obsessive over a Bible scripture, and it just kept replaying in my head, and I had anxiety and intrusive thoughts, basically.
Not intrusive thoughts.
Yeah. And I remember I was going to a storage unit for some of our stuff, and the guy was like, oh, it was 9 a.m. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry. We're 10 minutes delayed. Can you wait? And I started screaming at him, and I got out of my car and I slammed the door, and he was like, it's 9 a.m. It's okay. And I was just like, it's not okay. Nothing's okay. And I just was hyperventilating.
Yeah.
So he sat me down. I forgot this happened. Thanks for no, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
He sat me down and he's like, you're okay. You're okay. And I was like, it's not okay. And that happened for about 30 minutes, and I calmed down, and I drove back to my dad's house, which was
had a complete stranger sit you down
Yeah.
and basically talk you through
yes.
a panic attack.
And to me, it was just all right. And then get in my car. And, I just didn't stop to say, hey, how am I doing? What am I feeling? And that man, bless his heart, but he saw that I wasn't okay.
Yeah. I feel like he was a Randy.
Yeah.
Randy, thank you if you're out there.
Yeah. And my dad had this small apartment in Irvine, and I moved in there with him, and I thought it was going to be my life is over. He was depressed. I was depressed. I had no job. My friends were all in LA. I was like, this is the end of me. But that started my big healing journey. And it was a slow journey. I think people sometimes are and then everything was
right.
But that's not the case. We know that's not the case. Life is full of ups and downs, but I couldn't really work. So I ended up being a swim instructor, which for someone who was always about their career, I wanted to be in Forbes 30 under 30. And now I'm just this rinky dinky swim instructor. I would come home, and there was a park next to my dad's house, and I would walk around and around that park, and I would just walk and be like, what the hell? Are you real? What is going on? Who am I? Why did you allow this to happen? And I got a therapist, and I thought going to church would be the solution. So, so there was one day that I was like, okay, I'm going to go to church. I'm going to muster up all my strength and energy, and I'm going to go to a new church because that is what I need right now.
Yeah.
And I remember like I walked up to this church, and this woman, she was like, I don't know, let's say her name was Karen. She was in the welcome.
Not a Karen at the church.
Right. She was like at the welcome people, and she's like, hi, are you new? And I was like, oh, yeah. And she's like, what's your name? I'm like, oh, I'm Kristina. And she's like, oh, okay. Are you married? And I was like, no. And she was like, oh, that's okay, sweetie.
No.
Yeah. And I looked at her, and I was thinking, I was like, I'm going to kill this bitch. I was so like, you know, like on, like anything could really flip me in a moment,
Yep,
right?
we've established
like
that.
I was working. Yeah. Like hard to admit, not let that happen. And
did this end up with you going to jail?
it did. No.
Okay.
Thank God. I was too dainty for that, you know?
Yep.
No, but I remember I went into church, and there was just like all this, it was a non-denominational church, and there was all this like smoke and like lights, and I was sitting there, and I swear to you, like I felt like I heard God laugh, or some like I just felt this feeling of laughter, and I had not known what that true feeling of laughter felt like for a very long time. And then I started laughing, and I was like, this is so ridiculous. Like all of these things, I'm sure God is so impressed with all of this. And I left there. I ended up meeting some girls that I went to this little small group. So I didn't go to the church, but I would go to this small group, and everyone was like, okay, Kristina. But we were this very weird group, and that little group was like a stable kind of place for me to go and start processing my feelings.
This podcast is brought to you by Promises Behavioral Health. If you or a loved one are struggling with trauma, addiction, or mental health, we are ready to answer your questions and help you take that next step. Call our admission center at 888-648-4098 or visit us online at www.promises.com. Our team is ready and waiting to answer the call for help.
And yeah, so after that, I was writing a lot. And, you know, I'm the person that has like, I own like 12 domains. Like I have 27 business ideas.
Of course.
You know, and I was sitting there, and I was like, okay, I'm going to publish my writing on the internet. And so I started this blog.
Can I pause you for just a second? At this point, had you already cut out the Adderall?
Yes.
So you stopped was it around the time that you started going to therapy? And
yeah. So I remember I ended up flushing it down the toilet like after, this was around the nervous breakdown time. Yeah. And I was like, this is not doing anything good for me. And I didn't know what recovery is. I didn't know what 12 steps were. I didn't know what, you know, it didn't cross my mind that any of those things were things that I needed. I just knew like I needed to stop. So I got help by going to therapy and going to this like rinky dinky small group.
Yeah.
But like I said, my progress was slow. Like I
mean, peer support is proven.
Yeah, that's what it was. I relied on them. Like it was a weird group of people too. Like, you know, when you go and like everyone shares, and it's just like people don't read the room and share the weirdest shit. And then you're just like, oh my God. But I loved how weird it was. Yeah. I kind of thrive around weird people and weird situations.
That's why we get along.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I ended up writing was the way for me to process what I was going through. But I was very cynical. I was very dry sense of humor.
Was that new for you?
No, it was just new in like, it was new in writing, I would say. Yeah, not in like real life. I mean, I feel like that's probably like a fair baseline.
Yeah.
And then I ended up publishing on the internet that I had a nervous breakdown, and I don't know what that means about faith. And I don't think that depression is a sin. And I don't think that anxiety means I have a demon in me. And so it's a very niche audience, but that little blog that I made on,
Sorry, I have to interject. Again, it's one of those things where you and I know what we're talking about.
Right.
But I feel like we have to like give some recognition to something you just mentioned right there. So in the circles that Kristina and I grew up in, having an addiction, a mental health issue, basically, correct me if I'm wrong from your point of view, right, was saying this is something that I struggle with rather than speaking the opposite and saying, I don't have this, I'm giving it over to God, whatever. But just, dealing with it and saying, this is what I, basically owning it. Is like, we were taught, right, that things like that were an attack from the devil, 100%. And that absolutely it was basically a manifestation of our relationship with God.
100%.
Something was coming in between that.
Yes.
So what do you do but internalize, I'm not being a good enough Christian.
Yeah.
Because this is
And I always felt like that. And so if you're depressed, if your baseline is depression and depressed, and then I have anxiety also, then I'm constantly like, I shouldn't be depressed because Jesus died for me.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's just the recurring. I shouldn't be depressed. And I have anxiety that the devil is influencing me. Those are two very real thoughts that I had a lot.
Yeah.
And in that process of walking around the park, I'd be like trying to break that down and be like, that doesn't make sense. But it was so deep in me because that's
all you've ever known.
That's all I knew. And I cling to my mom and I cling to those beliefs because I didn't want to go to hell.
Yes.
So that's what I believed Christianity was. I didn't know there were other forms, other denominations, other, all kinds of faith. I didn't.
That it was okay for you to maybe believe a little bit differently.
Yes. And so most of my therapy work has been like, Kristina, you are good enough. You matter. Like the most basics, And to this day, Pam, I told you about it. Shout out Pam. She's just like, what does little Kristina think? And I'm like, little Kristina thinks she's not good, and she's like, you are good. Yeah. Like you are good without doing anything. You're good without repenting. You're good without,
Yes. You want to hear something cool?
Yes, please.
The comedian that I was telling you about, Amber Autry.
Yes.
Was on the show recently. She shared something while she was here that I just love. And as I've remembered it, which is few times, but the times that I have, it's been really meaningful to me. Her therapist, part of her emotional recovery was to speak to her inner child every time you pass a mirror. Instead of worrying about what's on the outside, look at the mirror and look in your eyes and tell yourself something positive to your inner child about you are beautiful inside and out. I'm so grateful you're alive today. I'm so glad you woke up. I'm so glad I love myself. I love you, inner child. Whatever you can think of that is loving the inside versus what we use a mirror for on the outside all the time.
That's so good.
It's so simple, but
is. We weren't raised
so
with that.
Powerful.
Yeah.
Right. There's so many people out there that are like, inner child, what are you talking about?
It's trending.
That's some
You guys,
woo-woo
it's
crap.
going to be it's trending.
But who doesn't have, I think you've got your people that are like, oh, that makes sense. I've got some stuff that unresolved things from being a kid. And then you've got the people who are like, that's total BS. Pull yourself up by the bootstraps and deal with it. You're an adult now. That was when you were a kid.
Yeah.
Those are the people that are literally like, it's going to take so much work for them to get to their inner child.
Totally. My dad was one of them. But he went to therapy for the first time last year or 2 years ago. And we were like, not a Persian father going to therapy. No. Look at this. You have an inner child. And he'd be like, And we're like, yeah, look at you.
Props, Dad. Is he still going?
I think it's really expensive, but we're like, you should go back.
Okay.
But it's so true. I had no concept of an inner child, but I get this little, like, mine is like a teenager that comes out a lot. Like, so if I don't check myself, like often if I feel unsafe in a situation with especially an authority figure, or I will, 17-year-old Kristina will be like, what is going on?
Well, and that makes so much sense because when your life really started to get shaken up, you had to go live with, you were a teenager having to go live with other families.
Exactly.
And core emotional development probably really halted.
Yeah, it really did. I say like I'm 10 years behind in purity culture years, kind of. That's what I say. In dating and relationship. I mean, imagine dating me. There's a lot.
I can't imagine that, but I know a bunch of, never mind.
If you know anyone, no. I don't give myself enough credit though.
Y'all, okay, so if you're listening, watching, whatever, we're going to talk about, wait, what's your handle on socials real quick? We got to talk about it.
It's edgy Kristina Hart. Edgy was a joke.
Okay.
That's duck, because people were like, you're so edgy, because I would be like, like the most basic thing. Vanilla, and then I kept it, and now I'm like, yeah, that's my handle. It's a joke and a joke, I guess.
I love it. I mean, I love making people try to figure it out. Like,
I know.
And honestly, there's an edge to what you do now, right? So anyway, dating jokes galore. It's so much fun to follow along your content journey. So please check Kristina out. Edgy you. Kristina Hart.
Yeah.
H-A-R-T.
H-A-R-T.
Yeah. Not
like
H-A-R-T.
Kevin Hart.
Yeah.
But one day we'll be that famous.
Heck yeah. Speak that out into existence.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gosh. Okay. So I keep rabbit trailing and I'm sorry.
No, this I feel like it's too ADD people sitting here. Yeah. Because we don't have Adderall.
That's right. This is what coping looks like.
Right. Look at us doing it.
We're doing it.
I know.
Somebody just clicked the stop button on this episode. No, I'm just kidding. You better not.
Keep going. Keep listening. There's
don't quit
second.
before the miracle.
Yeah. Please don't.
Please don't.
Signs, wonders, miracles. Yeah. Then there was a whole evangelical culture that I kind of got thrown into.
We're talking about
like
the 10 years behind in purity culture,
yes,
right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I have to say this because I can relate too, right? I had to be pure, and obviously I'm gay. Hello.
I had no idea.
Yeah, I didn't come out till I was 25. So
last year.
Thank you. So many people think I'm older than that, but it's really the truth.
Little 26.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm just very mature for my age. So
same.
Yeah. So I mean, like, I feel like I didn't really start dating until I'm like more than 10 years behind, right? Like, not to mention for me the emotional stunt from the addiction, right?
Right.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
Basically, I mean, I'm really a little older than 26, but I'm probably like a 21-year-old, and for all intents and purposes. But anyway, I mean, whatever, YOLO. I
was, I in college was trying to figure things out, right? So I was like, felt like a guilty Christian all the time. And then
no, not a guilty Christian.
Right. Yeah. And then when I had this blog and then got thrown, I was like the funny single Christian girl in Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. And even like, this is so embarrassing, but like celebrity LA evangelical culture. So like Hillsong and like all the pastors and all the people, like I was in these groups because they thought I was funny and I'm Christian. But that was like a very still the bubble because I was like, oh, this is still supposedly safe.
Yeah.
And so then I was like, I'm going to date because I'm writing jokes about dating. I'm going to date like Christian. So I'm like 28 years old, like 30 years old. And I'm like, can I spend the night at someone's house? Can I, things that teenagers are thinking about were things that I was processing. in what to do. So it was the dumbest, funniest, if it wasn't real, like situations. But I would still just talk about it because I was like, this is weird.
Yeah.
Does anyone else think this is weird? And then it got to a point where I saw things that were like problematic, and I was slowly deconstructing, like basically from just processing and writing about these experiences. And then that made me veer a different direction, which did give me freedom to pursue comedy and writing and things that weren't in that bubble. But that evangelical culture completely, they rejected me after I was like, I don't like Trump, and I don't think being gay is a sin, and I don't think I believe in hell. And so it was like, oh, Kristina's like gone off the rail. We need to pray for her. She needs church in Jesus. Like people were saying this on podcasts. And so I had a very weird this guy, I went on a date and this guy was like, your life has been weird. And I'm like, it is. It's a weird story to tell, you know?
Yeah.
But it is my story. And so then I ended up being someone who speaks out against abuse and speaks out against these situations. Like when I first moved to Nashville, I went to the undercover at the SBC Southern Baptist Convention dressed as a man to document the abuse scandal that I think is pretty public now. Like,
yes.
Yeah, everyone knows. Yeah.
But I did not know that you went.
Yeah. And I documented the whole thing, and it was crazy.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's how I shifted online. And then I became I'm very obviously, I love political jokes. Like I love observing culture, and I love just making fun of the intersection of religion and modern culture, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Yeah. And all, especially right now in this era. And yeah.
I think that we have, I'm just going to put my views out there right now. I struggle a lot with people who say I undoubtedly, wholeheartedly have the ultimate, whatever faith you are, whatever denomination you are. Like when you think that you've got all the answers, you've chosen the one true only way, and every single, like your interpretation of the Bible is the only one. And, you know, and like that, I think there's a fallacy, because faith is faith. And I think that we can all cling to something, right? Like how your higher power presents itself to you in whatever you believe. But I also think that personally, I have found more freedom to grow closer to God and my fellow humans and fellow Christians when I'm able to say, these are the truths that I've known to be for my faith. And I can let go of needing to feel right or wrong about yours.
Exactly.
I wasn't raised to believe like that.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of polarizing stuff going on. I brought this specific thing up because you said, you know, that basically you were talking about the people that it's divisive. Like church culture is so divisive right now. Not all of it, but a lot of it. I just had Pete Wilson on from the former pastor.
Yeah.
That church.
Yes.
Don't want to name it, but a church in Nashville that's done a lot of good. But there's just, you know, some stuff. Anyway, this isn't about that congregation, but he was talking about cancel culture in the church, that the church was the originator of cancel culture. And I think there's so much of that. If you don't believe just exactly like we do, then you're not one of us.
Exactly.
You're not saved. You're not this, you're not that. And I think it's a very dangerous territory to be in.
Even the concept, I was thinking this, I'm like, even the concept of saying you're a believer or you're saved, it's like, what are you saying about everybody else? So they're non-believers and they're not saved.
Right.
So what is it, like the PC way of saying they're going to hell?
Yes. And they're condemned.
How do you exist? How can you exist in truly loving people or just being non-biased and non-judgmental with that thought process. I don't think you
can't.
I don't think you really can.
No.
But that's a bold thing to say if you were raised evangelical, because that is all you knew.
Exactly. And I think that's why we have so many people. I mean, it's been a theme. I think, my gosh, you're the fourth interview in a row that I've talked to where we're talking about religious trauma. There's so much of it going on right now with people in our age range. And I'm sure outside of our age range, but I mean, I think like we're of the decade where, oh my God, the Britney Spears song was "Still a Girl, Not Yet a Woman." Wait,
I'm not a girl, not yet a woman. I am the one person in Nashville that cannot sing. I can tell a joke, but I cannot sing. I mean, it resonates even with people who are older, but the religious trauma is a unifying factor for a lot of people in our age group, or else it wouldn't, quote unquote, deconstruction wouldn't be such a hot topic. Right. Nobody would follow me if it wasn't,
right.
But
the conversations that I love to have are ones like you and I have had before, which is not just deconstruction. It's, I'm deconstructing from the belief system that I inherited that wasn't choice for me. That was, I literally, and I'm going to put words in your mouth. This is basically, we both agreed on that, the same thing for both of us, right? Like I believed what I was taught out of fear. So it's not a relationship with a person or with a deity if all of the things that bind you to that relationship are actions based out of fear for what you don't want.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, a common thread between me, between you, between so many other people that have religious trauma. Why wouldn't we deconstruct and say, I can't do this anymore?
Yeah.
Like, I would rather risk eternal damnation first just to figure out escape this madness, right? And I think the important part of the conversation, though, that we don't hear enough of is the other side that you and I were talking about, which is coming to a place of saying, I've deconstructed from the part that doesn't serve me, but I know there's something out there.
Yeah.
I know God to be real and how they present themselves to me. But there's a journey of seeking and finding. Mm-hmm. What has that journey been like for you?
Yeah, I think you put it so well. If you're not making choices out of fear and you find yourself realizing that you can make choices about what you believe in without fearing going to hell, but what that means is you don't believe in certain things like hell existing maybe, or that it's not something that needs to be on your mind every day, but you still believe in Jesus, and there's all these other interpretations to the life of Jesus and Christianity. But if you're someone who's come to that, like myself, but you're putting stuff out there, then people get so afraid because they're like, what she is saying is now threatening my belief system in believing there's a hell, and I have to believe these things in order to avoid it. And that can be so frightening for somebody else who has never allowed themselves to consider that.
Right.
So for me, my process has been, I went through a tragedy that I took like 3 years out of life, from regular work and regular to figure out how to live and how to breathe and how to pray, or what that looks like. And those years, like I think about when I was in Irvine and I thought my life was ending, and that guy, that sat me down on the curb after, and I don't have any negative memories of that time. I only have positive memories because I allowed myself to be the lowest I could be and just be like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And that was so freeing. So now my process, I think now has been, I like to push the boundaries of what I'm allowed to say, because I think it allows me to think more, critically think.
Yes.
And I feel like it gives permission for other people too, if they feel like they need it, which I certainly felt like I needed it when I was younger. So I try to just be what the younger version of Kristina thought she needed. And it makes people happy and it makes people mad, and I'm okay with that. And I feel like that's kind of the path that I've taken in this road. And I'm always like, I wonder what Sherry would think, but she had a phenomenal sense of humor. So I think I got that from her.
How beautiful. What a gift to have been given, like of all the things that could be passed down from,
I don't know. I think singing would have been nice. I feel like I could have made more
I'd
money.
much rather be funny than...
No,
Yes.
Really?
I mean, I am funny, but
you are funny. But I mean, can you sing?
I think some people would say that I can.
Okay.
And some people might not agree with those people.
Well, we gotta hear you.
I love causing a little controversy.
I love it too.
Not the controversy. My gosh. So, God, there's so many themes.
It's been great. Thank you.
This has been so amazing. I want to circle back though to how we talked about like conflict, trauma, feelings that were so uncomfortable that you had to escape and numb. So oftentimes you had a medicator that was unhealthy. You took that coping mechanism away, brought in therapy, right? What do you do today to deal with your emotional dysregulation when you find yourself uncomfortable?
Yeah.
To self-regulate.
Yeah. I use a lot of DBT, dialectical behavior therapy skills, but I learned those when I worked at a treatment center in LA. I feel like I've lived so many lives. But now if I feel myself getting triggered, usually it's because I think something's going to be taken away from me. That's kind of like, I feel like what threatens me.
Well, let's narrow it. Okay. So somebody else said this and I love it because for me, if you had asked me what fear, like what is a simple definition of fear? It's being afraid. Being afraid of what? All fear boils down to one of two things. Fear that you're not going to get something that you believe you deserve, and fear that you're going to get something you're scared of or believe you do not deserve. There's no other kind. Those are the two fears. Like every fear can literally be put in those two buckets. For me, it's simple. Like that's like a brain explosion.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, and I think I am often afraid that it's the whole left behind thing. No pun intended. Oh my gosh. No pun intended.
When you were a kid, did you used to run downstairs when you hadn't heard anything?
Yeah. And you're like, is my family still here? I mean, everything was based out of fear, the rapture. I don't know if you guys know what that is, but if you don't, congratulations, because you
Oh, we're not going to leave it there. I'm going to explain it. Okay. So for those of us who grew up in this type of church, there's
the Left Behind
Revelation, right? Yeah. But it's based off of the book of Revelation, which is the last book of the Bible. Loosely based of an interpretation of the book of Revelation in the Bible, which foretells the end times, where basically
Kirk Cameron.
Yeah. How do we simplify? Like basically that everybody is raptured up to heaven. Yeah. And except for all the Christians are, and everyone else is left on earth until to live what 9 years of tribulation before the earth is destroyed.
Yeah,
right.
Right. This is a very strongly held belief.
Yes.
Which is crazy. I don't know how to. That's pretty wild.
I'm going to lose some friends over this episode. It's okay. I still love y'all anyway.
I know, me too. No, me too, you guys.
You're fine.
Interject, but talk about, there's that thing where they say like everybody gets a sign. Like,
the sign of the beast.
Oh, Mark of the Beast.
Yeah.
Literally my friend's aunt freaked out coming out of a Costco on Ash Wednesday because everybody else had crosses and she didn't realize it was Ash Wednesday, so she thought she was getting left behind.
So like that
She
stayed,
figured it out,
but that still was like a thought process,
Yeah.
which is,
I mean, it's a totally real thing, right? Like, so she was talking about a friend, Aunt thought that that Ash Wednesday, she didn't realize it was Ash Wednesday. Everybody had the crosses on their foreheads, but she didn't have one, and thought that, I guess, the rapture was, or maybe, I don't know if she thought it was the mark of the beast or not, or whatever. But there's the mark of the beast that's supposedly, and I can't remember, it's been so long since I've studied this, that supposedly during the 9 or leading up to the 9 years of tribulation, there's somebody that will come to power that's supposedly, that's the Antichrist, that will, gosh, this is all coming back to me.
this is wild. Yeah. I love it. Keep going.
So there are supposedly 3 years prior to the rapture happening, where the Antichrist will rise to power, and everybody will be deceived. Nobody will really believe that he's actually the Antichrist, and part of that will be a mark of the beast that's going to be developed, and there's a bunch of differing opinions on what exactly that specific mark will be. There? Yes.
Oh, like
but I mean, like, I think there's something about it being on the forehead.
Yeah. But then also, like, if you go on the internet,
that might be where 666 comes from. I think it might. I think it might be.
Yeah, and that's where, if you go on Facebook, especially, people will call all kinds of things the mark of the beast.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like very real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then the rapture happens. The Antichrist is still in power, and there's 3.5 more years of like crazy. So I think it's a total of 7 years. The first, it's 3.5 of good, and everybody's like wowed by this Antichrist figure, and they're under this like spell, right? And then the rapture happens, and the second 3.5 years is like tribulation, turmoil, all this stuff that's just so horrible.
Yeah.
So the rapture is specifically where all the Christians are, Jesus comes back and all the Christians are raptured up to heaven instantaneously, right? Then everybody else who's not a Christian is left on earth. Mm-hmm. So as kids, what Kristina and I are talking about is thinking, because we've been told our whole lives the rapture is about to happen. The rapture is about to happen. It's almost happening.
Or if you're right now, everyone's like, it's happening now.
Right.
And people will be like,
it's always been happening.
It's always been happening.
Our whole lives. We were constantly terrified, right? And that's what we're joking about, y'all, is that
like the fear of abandonment. Like, think about
yes, fear of abandonment. It's a wonder
like,
we didn't.
Yeah,
it's a wonder we didn't end up borderline. You're
exactly.
not. Are you borderline?
No.
Okay,
I mean, no judgment. No judgment.
I mean, I might be. Nobody's told me yet. God, maybe I am.
we can diagnose you.
Oh gosh.
Look, yes. So that manifests.
No.
Yeah. So that manifests as like, fear of abandonment.
Yes.
And fear something's going to be taken away from me. Fear that good things are going to be taken away from me. Fear that, like, if something good happens to me, it's not going to last. Fear that I'm not deserving of this good thing, because am I sure that I'm not going to be left behind? And I think that I get triggered. I can get triggered by if I start to think that I'm other people get things and I don't. There's these recurring intrusive thoughts that I can get, and but I now use a lot of mindfulness to sit there. I mean, it's so basic, but just to acknowledge my thoughts and realize, like, okay, it's just a thought and it passes, and I feel so much better by just observing and letting it go. So I don't actually have to react to it, which I used to be so reactionary because I didn't know.
Every single thought, same here.
Yeah.
Yes.
So thank God I'm so much better now. I still, there's something in me that it's a little feisty, which comes out on the internet, but that's the best place for it to come out, I think.
I know, right? It's the most lucrative.
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
People are going to listen to this. They're going to be like, wow, we didn't know all this about Kristina.
The more you know. I always make reference to the commercial, the star and the rainbow. And you remember the commercial?
No, but I was going to go with it.
We're the same age.
I know. Who looks better? Just kidding.
When we're done filming, I'm going to show it to you, and you're going to go, oh, yeah.
I'll probably remember. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I may have watched more TV than you as a kid, but
I watch more now, probably.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Touche. Oh gosh. Okay, so this has been so great. I know that there are some people out there going, "Wow, I just got a huge education," and then also some other people going, "Oh, I felt so much the same."
Yeah.
And I need solution. I mean, I love the way that you broke down, and hear me when I say, like, I think both of us come from a standpoint of believing that God's real and love, and that I think that coming from the perspective that we are from, like, religious trauma, so much of that is humankind taking their own interpretation of God and dividing people and saying either you're with us or you're not, and if you're not, you're screwed. And
us and them,
right? And so the transformation and miracle of coming out from that and finding
maybe there's just us.
Yeah. Unity, wholeness, love. And when I think about the person of whether you believe in Jesus was the Messiah or not, when I think about the person that Jesus, that we learn about in history that Jesus was, like, to me, that is a representation.
Yeah.
Like, he took the woman who was being stoned, right?
Yeah.
Like,
he put a line in the sand. Said, which one of you sin, cast the first stone? Like, right. I think
it's not us.
That's the thing, is Jesus. As a kid, I remember what Jesus meant, and as an adult, I still remember that. That's like enough for me without having to. I think a lot of people think that you have to figure out theologically all of these things.
Isn't it great when you get to the point where you're like, I don't have to figure.
I don't have to do that.
I don't have to have the answer.
I don't have to have the answer. And that's why I love, like, the 12 steps. I mean, I learned a lot of them later, and I didn't necessarily, like, practice each one, but I definitely hold the principles of them, and I like how it just simplifies. Like, God, the higher power.
I credit the 12 steps for literally bringing me back to, I had shelved my relationship with God. I didn't become necessarily an atheist or a agnostic or anything like that. But I definitely was like, I'm not thinking about it. I was young, right? Like, so of course I thought, like, I've got time to figure religion out later. But I definitely was like, I shelved it, right? Yeah.
Which is okay.
But yeah, like, it was, I wouldn't have had a relationship with God, I don't think, eventually, if 12 steps hadn't been thrust upon me.
Yeah.
It's a blessing for sure.
It's true.
Okay, so
we covered so much.
And I mean, you could speak to so many different things, but I always love to wrap up and end with when you think about your life and what we've talked about and the problems and solutions, for the individual or individuals who have identified with your story, what encouragement would you like them to walk away with today?
Yeah. I think the basics of, I understand what it's like to just feel at the end of yourself and not have hope, and just think like everybody else gets there and you don't. And that's not true. Like, everything is constantly changing, and life is for you, and you are enough and you matter without doing anything else in your life. And so I think if you can just rest and receive life as it comes, that's just a wonderful gift that I try to live out now. Yeah.
Thank you for that. And I wanted to reiterate one thing, because it was so good. It actually impacted me as we were talking. You talked about shifting your thought process because you had been so used to growing up being reactionary to a thought as it would happen.
Yes.
And you transitioned to being observant.
Yes.
Right. Mm-hmm. And just real quick, so an example of when you have a thought that is somewhat uncomfortable to you, what does it look like to be observant of that thought?
Yeah. Okay, let's say I'm jealous.
Yeah.
I feel jealousy, and I can feel that. I will sit there and observe. I feel jealous. Okay, what else am I feeling? It's like, oh, I feel like they're gonna get something that I deserve. And then I don't judge the thought, but I'm like, oh, that's silly. Like, good things come for me too. And it ends there. So it doesn't need to spiral me into a resentful or a pattern that's unhelpful, which it used to. Yeah.
Beautifully put.
I'm perfect now. I'm kidding.
Perfectly imperfect.
Perfectly imperfect.
Love that.
Yeah.
Gosh, Kristina Hart, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Yes.
It's been so nice.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful.
Ditto.
Yeah.
Thank you to each and every one of you who stuck through this episode with us. I'm glad that you're here. And I hope and I know that, if you've still stuck around to the end of the episode, I always say this because I'm like, you know what? Some people cut out halfway through. Fine. Blessings to you. But those of you who've stuck with us, I know you've gotten, more out of it. And I'm glad that you're here. And I will close out this episode like I do every single one by reminding each and every one of you that you're only ever one decision away from a completely different life. And it is never too late to start loving yourself.
This podcast is brought to you by Promises Behavioral Health. If you or a loved one are struggling with trauma, addiction, or mental health, we are ready to answer your questions and help you take that next step. Call our admission center at 888-648-4098 or visit us online at www.promises.com. Our team is ready and waiting to answer the call for help.